Okay, I'm back with another mad rambling as per usual. So, how's everybody? I hope you guys had a lovely week. I'm making this on Saturday, so it's the weekend for me. Okay, so what is today's mad rambling by your local nut job? Okay, this whole thing about Trump, Gaza, Palestine, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what I'm going to talk about today is basically the Western mentality and why, and this will lead into the way China is treating the US this time about the trade war negotiations. So it's going to be a huge ramble-ass mess that I'm going to deliver irrespective of whether you enjoy these types of talks or not. Okay, so there are some people who are thinking at this moment that Trump is really sticking it to Netanyahu because he's not included. Israel was not included in the stopovers for his Middle Eastern tour. And Israel is not part of the negotiation. And also, but Trump stopped over and had a good old yarn with the Iranians. And apparently that's basically pissing Netanyahu off. Okay. Do you know back when there was a trade war with China, Trump 1.0, the first version of Trump. And then after that, they were talking about possibly... Oh, the blowing up of the pipeline. Yeah, that was the Trump/Biden takeover time where Nord Stream and all that debacle. And then they were talking about possibly China making, or Europe making amends with China or something like that. And this was back in the day when I was still actively posting. And I said, no, it's not. Because there is nothing on this planet that binds white Western people together than the color of your skin. Now, let me repeat that. There's nothing that binds white Western people than the color of your skin. And I'm talking about that in terms of a category and in terms of something being objective that you can see, actual white skin. Okay. I remember, I mean, nobody else remembers because I'm an internet nobody, but I actually was talking to this or rebutted this China expert who said, you see, things can turn around. Like Germany is beginning to make amendments towards China. It was also connected with the Huawei thing. And I said, no, it's not. These are projections that we as Asians make onto white people because we always want them finally to be the hero. Even as Asians, this is what we want. And I know many people say, well, no, that's not true. But I'm telling you, it is the truth because there's no other way to justify what's happening right now. Okay, so if white skin is the only thing that binds, and it is, because never forget, during World War II, when Black Americans, African Americans were fighting on the side of US, they still had to eat separately in the mess halls, right? Whereas the German captives, the quote-unquote enemies, could eat with the American white soldiers. So what's the point of that? So like I was saying, the fight between white people to white people is a fight based on equals. And hence, irrespective of who wins or loses, there's a certain amount of respect for that. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, what about Russia? So remember, I said objectively white and also by nomenclature or by category. Russia is Eurasian. It's a halfer, okay? It's a biracial. I mean, and if anybody has actually gotten to know biracials, Eurasians, especially in Asia and in the West, this is what you're going to understand most. Biracial people who were born and raised in Asia always side with the West side, their white side in Asia, because it gives them clout. When they go over to a Western country and they look, in comparison, predominantly Asian, they will say that they are the Asian side of the half, because there's no other way to identify, because they know that they're not fully accepted. But then the argument that they'll put forth is, hey, but when I'm in Asia, I'm not fully accepted either. But there's a difference. The non-acceptance in Asia is one based on a superiority non-acceptance versus an inferiority one. So let's get real. I don't talk bullshit here. I never do, okay? In Asia, if you're born Eurasian, ipso facto, you're considered beautiful. I mean, and I'm going to be truthful as well. If you are mixed with a darker hue, people tend to comment less on your physical attractiveness. If you are mixed with white, even if you're butt ugly, and I don't understand why people automatically assume mixed people are beautiful. No, because it depends on the genetic stock as well. If you've got fugly parents, I mean, seriously, Jesus Christ, I don't know what I'm saying. Okay, so if you get parents who are kind of unattractive, what you're going to end up with is a child that even if they take the best attractive features from each unattractive parent, they're not going to become an attractive person physically. I mean, I'm not talking about personalities here. I'm just talking about physically, right? And I've seen many Eurasians that are not beautiful at all, that are not handsome. But what I'm saying is, it's the kind of positive discrimination rather than the negative one. However, if you ask the biracials who are born in Asia about the discrimination, they'll give you a harrowing tale about how difficult it is, and they'll try to equate that level of kind of superior discrimination versus the inferior one to be just as just as heart-wrenching. But it's not. Who are we kidding? Okay, let's just talk truthfully here. Okay, so if nothing binds white people other than skin, what do you actually think this whole Trump thing in the Middle East is? Do you honestly think he's had a change of heart? And remember, very specifically, we're not talking about the Jewish people from the Jewish homeland, like traditional Jewish people who have never actually left the whole Palestinian area, Israel area. Those Jewish people are not the Zionists that we see. They are European Jewish people, the ones who are wreaking havoc in this world. So let me make that mark very clear. So if nothing binds white Western people more than skin color, and what Israel is doing is a classic colonial rule, ethnic cleansing genocide, why on earth would you think that the display that Trump has at the moment is not part of a good cop, bad cop routine? This is the thing that really flummoxes me. Like, are you kidding? Do you honestly think Trump, in all his infinite stupidity, is actually having a change of heart and now deciding to side with the, oh, okay, you guys rule your own Middle Eastern turf because we shouldn't come wagging fingers? Do you really think that's real? Another thing is, Trump is not really aligned with Netanyahu. The West is aligned with Israel in controlling a strategic area. Okay, so these are entirely different things. Irrespective of the actual personal connection Trump has or does not have with Netanyahu, does not foil the plan of what the Western imperial state needs Israel to control in the Middle East. That doesn't in any way have any effect, because it's not the king that is important, it's the throne, right? It's the throne that will outlive a king. So I don't even understand why people cannot simply understand that this is just a routine, because if Trump was any different to Biden, to anybody else, all he needs to do is put a kibosh on the arms sales. There's just no ifs and buts. Just stop it. I mean, I'm not a genius to espouse this. Everybody can see. A 3-year-old kid can see, right? If you don't want people to fight over things in the sandbox, or you don't want a kid to take a plastic toy truck to pelt another on the head in the sandbox, just take away the toy truck and substitute fluffy toys or something like that, right? There's a certain amount of damage that can be done using fluffy toys, and it's not going to involve like a bloodied head or any scratches which will lead in blood, because it's a soft toy. So this is what I'm saying. There's no such thing as anybody from the states in the government who has any intention of severing the bond with Israel, not with Netanyahu. That's completely different. Remember the difference between a king and the throne, okay? All right, so what's this about China then? What am I going on about? Okay, this is what I mean. Right now, China has definitely brought the US to its knees, because the US chased China to get this negotiation, and basically everything's been reverted to before Liberation Day. That's all fine and dandy. However, now, okay, there's the Huawei chips. That's another issue. But even discarding that, China is now thinking of putting the prohibitions list, or erasing certain elements of the prohibition list, so that they can get access to the rare minerals again, or maybe some parts. Okay, why do I disagree with that? Is this reason. And I've heard like people like Cyrus Jansen and everybody says pretty much the same thing, Ben Norton and all that batch, that if China doesn't, it realizes that America will eventually find a way to get these resources anyway, and it will encourage them to basically resurge as a mining superpower, because China is thinking in the same way that it sees itself. Now, like I always say, in order to win a war with the enemy is to not to think of the enemy in the terms of yourself. It's know thyself in order to understand the enemy, right? So not to project yourself as the enemy. Huge difference there, huge difference. So what China is thinking is that the US, if it doesn't sell them these rare minerals, then they're going to start developing their mines, because rare minerals are not rare, and they're going to go through the refining process. Hey, but wait on. How long is that going to take? And whose development is going to rise to the ascension point faster? China's or the US? Now let's analyze this, okay? So in China's case, what does China need to do? It strategically needs the world to move onto its side, and it currently already has done via BRICS. So the majority of the population, the world's population, and the resources are all located in the BRICS countries. That's already China's basic trump card, right? That's China's hand already. However, how can China clinch the deal is to make sure that there is endless energy to convert resources into something else. Our world obeys physical laws more than political, social, psychological, economic. It obeys the laws of physics. The only movement that you'll see is when one particular energy changes form into another, because it can't be destroyed, it can't be recreated. So the only thing that China needs is basically a continuous energy source to propel the team members on its side, to fully and utterly displace and flatten the West and bring it back on even keel, which is the number of people in the Western countries and the resources that they are naturally given in proportion to their GDP is what China should aim to do. Okay, why is that necessary? Because there are some enemies that have a conscience, and if they lose against you in a fight, you can kind of rehabilitate their thoughts into a way that is more kind of quote unquote correct or normal or nice. But there are some people that you can't. And those who you can never convert into another way of thinking because of this inherent kind of tick in their system, the only way is to destroy them so they don't have a chance to come back. We've already seen enough superhero movies where the quote unquote hero doesn't deliver the coup de grace to the villain, and then upon the last kind of like the hero turns to leave, and then the villain basically gets up and shoots them or knives them or something like that. And all the while you're just thinking, you idiot, regarding the hero, right? You should have just basically laid that your enemy to waste, because you already know this enemy has had numerous chances to redeem themselves and basically turn over a new leaf, and never once have they done that. So why give them that chance? Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. 500 years of brutal colonial rule, plunder, pillage, rape. They've never had a change of heart until they were forced to. The Haiti Revolution, China's Boxer Rebellion, like just go and name any point in history in which the West has willingly come to their senses, felt bad, and said, okay, I won't continue this pillage anymore. Never, never, never is the answer. Never. So what I mean by finishing the West once and for all, it doesn't mean the annihilation of Western people. It means annihilation of the system or the way in which they can come back as you walk off, exercising clemency for them to knife you at the back. That's what I mean. What China needs to do, back to my original point, is supply unending energy for the BRICS nation, to ASEAN, to RCEP, any of those agreements, unlimited energy, in order for them to basically change natural resources into goods, into production, into IP. That's all it needs to do. China's already on that way. I told you about I didn't tell you, the news did, the thorium nuclear reactor. So that's like 60,000 years of energy going on there. They've got the artificial sun. They're launching solar panel into space. They're doing all those things, which means this energy component, I mean, petroleum is still going to be used, but not to the extent that will cripple an economy or force them into subservience if they don't get access to petroleum. So that energy equation is already pretty much going to be solved, my guess is, within 10 years, if not 5. So China has this ultimate card that it will not play, because it's like that superhero that instead of delivering the coup de grace, it allows that enemy to play dead. And just as China gets up to walk away, believing it's exercising clemency, leniency, you're going to see America come back up and knife it at the back. And so this is an unnecessary pain that China doesn't have to go through, because it should never leave an enemy that is as unscrupulous as the West alive. Okay? And this is what I'm saying. If as Asians, we don't change the way that we think, if we believe that we are on the same level as the Westerners, in the sense that, okay, all they need is a little bit of understanding, this is our fatal flaw, because it's not the same understanding. Human DNA expression runs the entire gamut of being very generous and very evil. We all do. However, genes are not expressed in the same way, because epigenetics plays a factor, right? We all know that certain genes are triggered in certain environments and others are suppressed. And if you get this like expanded over thousands of years and into cultures, you get distinct categories of personalities that are pertinent to people who live in different spheres. Never forget, though we do, because we associate rich countries to be the West, the poorest countries in the world are the West. This is why they go and steal. This is the 500 years of stealing stuff, is because they come from the poor countries. Now, coming from a poor background, is there anything wrong with that? Nope. But it means you're coming from a mentality of scarcity, not abundance. So what does this mean? This means insecurity. It means the fear that somebody's going to take something away unless you hoard onto it. And it's a dog-eat-dog world, right? Because you never feel safe enough because your background was poor. This is why you get celebrities, right, who were genuinely from poor families, who even after they strike it rich, they either like spend like crazy like mofas, right? Or they are so stingy. You're thinking, why did you even get like money in the first place? It doesn't even make sense, right? You get these kind of extremes. One is the needing to experience a life in which there's accolades and adoration, something that they were lacking. And the other is scarcity, the feeling of like having nothing all over again. And the West is this too, working in synchronicity, right? They want people to give them the adoration and pay homage to them because of what they quote unquote did, civilize, bring science to everybody. And they're also really scared of losing it because they know it wasn't theirs. They never had it in the first place, right? Now, this scarcity mentality breeds or leads onto how these respective states will rule. The countries that are naturally rich, like Asia, like we already know, like Malaysia, like from Eurasia onwards, the Russian land patch from Ukraine onwards, right? These are very abundant resource-rich places, Africa especially. And so the people that grow up in these places naturally have things to begin with. They were naturally abundant. So there's the scarcity mentality isn't there. So when they rise to power and when they rule, they are going to rule differently from the West. And so I don't know why people don't understand this basic mechanism. People are not the same. They have the same gene variation, but they don't have the same gene expression, right? So for all the morons who say China's going to be just as bad as the West or worse, they're just idiots. They're bona fide idiots who don't even need to be like, who don't deserve an answer, who don't deserve you even bothering telling them anything, because that's just stupid. China has always been a country, besides getting drugged by the Brits, where it naturally had enough things for its own people. I mean, famines withstanding. Okay, but those are cyclical and they're like natural, quote unquote, conditions in which in today's society they can be like rectified, this issue. But they've always had development. They've always been able to craft their way into things that they needed. And they never stole for that. They've always managed to work around their own like environment using their own materials. And also never forget, until I think 1984, China was actually a net exporter of petroleum. So it's not as if it's like completely without these natural goodies, okay? It naturally does have that. So it doesn't come from the mentality of scarcity. It comes from abundance. Generally, when people who have the mentality of abundance rules, they basically rule through being magnanimous, through being generous. So it is like the kind of like king who, in order to keep his citizens happy, like bribes them by giving them sweets and cookies, or the parent who does that. And the other parent, like the West, who comes from like a background of scarcity, what they rule is with an iron fist. And in order to give you anything, they insist on making everything equitable. But equitable is not 50-50. Equitable means for the help that they give you, they want that all returned, plus with some interest, because they believed that help itself, the notion of the help deserves to be rewarded as well, not only the actual object that they lent you, right? So they're two very different types of rule. So if we want to live in a world that continuously has a group of people who insist on taking crap away, who like taking stuff that you own, by any means possible, like any means necessary, then China should allow the West to survive. But if not, China needs to destroy the whole Western notion of even wanting to come back up and compete, but not compete fairly, compete using violence. That notion should be absolutely quelched. And that's what I'm saying. China's mistake this time, if it continues to allow these rare minerals to trade again, this is going to be China's own downfall, like in the longer term. Because by not allowing the US to have access to these minerals, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful effect. First of all, definitely the weaponry will stop. So this whole Gaza situation, you're going to eliminate totally. Because the Israelis, if they can't get access to the US weaponry, they can't do anything in Gaza. So that puts a kibosh to that. It slows the US side down drastically, because even should they have the scientists who are not Chinese working for them, and let's say they manage to come up with a few good ideas themselves, they can no longer test it because they don't have the abundance of materials to basically like play with, right? So that's going to slow that down. That's going to slow down their technology, in which it allows China's own ascension to increase at a higher or faster pace even. So it's not only the DeepSeek, it's the Harmony OS system. All you need to do is get the BRICS people to switch over the actual system, right? And basically the US no longer has any power within that region. So why China is insisting on renegotiating or allowing the minerals is something that I cannot fathom. Because there are certain enemies that you can let live, and then there are others that you can't. And the West is an enemy that you can't let live. Okay? Okay, so, but what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a little tarot thing. Okay, so right now, what is the... Okay, so my question was, what is the relationship between US and Israel? Legacy. Okay, so let's see what this one is. Let's see what this card is. So, Israel and the US. Oh, leaving the legacy. Okay. So this is the very funny thing, isn't it? Like, life mimics art. Okay, so if you take a look at this relationship dynamics, clearly this card is basically legacy. And so the connection that the US has with Israel is inherited. And, you know, it's inherited from the British system that created this whole Israel debacle, Israel-Palestine debacle to begin with. So it's an inherited thing. Right now, what you can see is, if you look at this card up close, right? You can see that this is the result of a nuclear fallout of some sort. So the indigenous people are swimming. There's this kind of like emergency gas mask, right? And all the children are basically there. This is Gaza, okay? And this situation here where all the kids and people are suffering, but going towards like leaving the destination of place of home or birth. This, of course, is not, it could be literal, unfortunately, in this case. This card is basically, yeah, one of leaving a present situation. Let me just see whether I can get, what's in the immediate future for Israel and the US? What's in the immediate future for the US? Oh, beautiful. But it came in reverse. So this is actually where things break apart, the relationship between Israel and the US. So you can see a structure that has been hit by lightning. My guess is that this is going to be an attack on Israel that's pretty much going to shake the foundations of the existing relationship. You know how recently Trump has changed his stance on Ansar Allah, the Houthis, because the Ansar Allah group have actually made a few really strategic moves in taking out the US ships. So my guess is, but it's in reverse at the moment, so okay, I just checked. Does this deck take reversals? It doesn't. Okay. So my opinion before was just my opinion. Okay, now let's see how the real world events turns out with this tarot reading. The tarot reading is actually saying that there is a break in the alliance between Israel and the US, because that's what I asked specifically. So the breaking of this card in tarot basically means the breaking of a system, the overthrowing of an old era or an old way of being for something new. And over here you can see that this is very old-fashioned, like bombing strategy here. You've got the cannons there. My guess is that there's possibly going to be an attack on Israel, not by the US itself necessarily, but that's going to hit a very strategic point in Israel that will truly make the US rethink its strategy in the Middle East regarding Israel. But my original thought about the actual alliance between the US and Israel being the throne rather than the two kings of Netanyahu and Trump still stand. But there will be, my guess is, a realignment of strategies, because this Tower card is a major disruptive force, which means that the old order is definitely going to be taken down in the immediate future, which is what I asked about. And the legacy that it inherited from the UK is, because this is a card of leaving something old in order for something new. And if coupled with this card, where the foundation is broken, then rightfully there is going to be a major change in the relationship between the US and Israel. Okay, well that's interesting. So my thought was my rambling. The tarots have given a different perspective from mine, because they're saying clearly there is a fundamental shift. But yeah, so if you stayed until now, congratulations. You're probably as nuts as I am. Have a nice weekend. Bye.